Hey guys, let's get more news about Steelers, but first, don't forget to subscribe and leave your like. Tim Benz, Steelers coaches can be upset about criticism of Kenny Pickett, but be aware of who is being critical. Based on what NFL on CBS reporter Aditi Kinkhabwala said on 93.7 The Fan Wednesday, the Steelers coaching staff is taking all the criticism of Kenny Pickett to heart. There was a lot of chatter at the Combine doubting Kenny Pickett, Kinkhabwala told hosts Andrew Filipponi and Chris Mueller. And, I'll tell you, multiple new members of this staff felt so charged, sort of so angered by that there's most definitely a personal investment in seeing him succeed. It's almost like a piece of the staff is taking it very, very personally that people want to trade Kenny Pickett off for other people's trash. It's interesting to note that Kinkhabwala is citing new members of the Steelers coaching staff. In other words, coaches that haven't coached Pickett yet. Coaches that might be thinking they are working with more clay to mold than what they really are. Those new coaches include offensive coordinator Arthur Smith and quarterbacks coach Tom Arth. But if the Steelers are upset at the criticism of Pickett, they better understand where it is originating. It's not all from columnists and talk show hosts like me. It's also coming from former Super Bowl champion Steelers, such as Ryan Clark on ESPN. While on Get Up Wednesday, Clark said that he expects the Steelers will indeed stick by Pickett unless he gets outperformed by a veteran quarterback acquired to push him. They're going to try to go out and get a veteran that can push Kenny Pickett, a veteran that they can have an unbiased competition with, Clark said. If Kenny Pickett wins that, now they can walk into the season and say, okay, we went out, and we tried to improve at the position, whether it's Ryan Tannehill or Russell Wilson, and Kenny Pickett was a better choice than they were to lead the team this year. So now we have the confidence in the guy we drafted in the first round with the 20th pick in 2022. And if they do all that, it is going to be on brand for the Pittsburgh Steelers. However, I'm getting the sense that when Clark says on brand for the Pittsburgh Steelers, he doesn't mean it in the most complimentary way possible. It's going to be dead wrong in this situation, Clark said of the prospect of Pickett maintaining the starting job. Because you're going to strap your team to a quarterback that can't lead you to the promised land. And the reason that the terrible towel means something, the reason that the 6 Lombardis mean something, is because that organization was built on excellence. Kenny Pickett is not going to be your leader to the promised land of excellence. And if he's not, I do believe it's time to go do something to make it different at that position. Yeah. What he said. Regarding Clark's soliloquy about what the Steelers used to be known for in terms of excellence, it sounds like he is saying that the standard is no longer the standard. That's not a reflection of the new coaches. That's a reflection of the 18-year veteran head coach who coined that phrase, not to mention the holdovers on that staff that have been at least a part of 7 consecutive seasons without a playoff victory. Clark is giving the impression that he is dubious of Pickett's chances to be under center and snap that string this year. But if merely avoiding losing seasons is the team's goal, then, perhaps, Pickett is the guy. Perhaps. That may be a best-case scenario. And if the Steelers' new coaches don't like reading that, maybe take it up with the old Steeler who has a Super Bowl ring on his finger. They sure won't see many of those around this current locker room. Buffalo Bills reunite with Mitch Trubisky as backup quarterback. The Buffalo Bills have made a familiar addition to their quarterback lineup, reaching an agreement with Mitch Trubisky on Wednesday, a source confirmed to ESPN. Trubisky will serve as the backup to quarterback Josh Allen once again, a role he filled during the 2021 season, which paved the way for him to compete for a starting position with the Pittsburgh Steelers starting in 2022. Last season, Kyle Allen served as Allen's backup, but he is poised to enter free agency next week. Meanwhile, Shane Buechele, who spent the entirety of last season on the Bills' practice squad, was signed to a reserve/futures contract in January. This reunion coincides with a day of significant financial decisions for the Bills, including the release of center and captain Mitch Morse. Trubisky saw action in 6 games with the Bills, attempting just 8 passes and scoring 1 rushing touchdown. Allen, on the other hand, has maintained a streak of consecutive starts since his rookie year in 2018. General Manager Brandon Beane discussed the importance of having experienced quarterbacks on the roster at the NFL Scouting Combine last week. He emphasized the value of having players who can step in and perform effectively even without having received reps during the week. Trubisky, now 29, was released by the Steelers on February 12, following a season where he struggled as a backup. He was benched for Mason Rudolph after a series of uneven performances, including 3 interceptions and 3 touchdowns during a 3-game stretch, while Kenny Pickett was recovering from an ankle injury and subsequent surgery. Initially signed by the Steelers during the 2022 free agency period, Trubisky started the first 4 games of the 2022 season before being replaced by Pickett at halftime of the Week 4 game against the New York Jets to inject life into the offense. Trubisky went 2-1 in relief appearances for the injured Pickett later in the season. During his time with the Steelers, Trubisky appeared in 12 games, starting 7 of them. He completed 64.1% of his pass attempts and threw 8 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. Throughout his career, Trubisky has accumulated 12,536 passing yards with 72 touchdowns and 48 interceptions in 69 games, including 57 starts. Jerry Dulac sees C. Jackson Powers Johnson as good bet for Steelers' first-round pick. Oregon C. Jackson Powers Johnson has garnered a lot of attention from those who cover the Pittsburgh Steelers. The dots are easy to connect, beginning with the fact that they don't have a starting center, sans Mason Cole. Steelers coaches saw him up close both at the Senior Bowl and the NFL Scouting Combine. As we trudge on nearer to the 2024 NFL Draft, Powers Johnson is beginning to feel like that Steelers pick. We've had them before. Cameron Hayward, Najee Harris, James Conner, Maurkice Pouncey. Less successfully, Jarvis Jones. These players landing in Pittsburgh surprised nobody. Add Jerry Dulac of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette to the list of those who sound as though they expect it. Or at least, strongly believe it's as likely an outcome as any. He alluded to it several times throughout his latest chat session. I haven't ruled out the first pick being an OL, maybe, and perhaps most likely even a center, he wrote. As we trudge on nearer to the 2024 NFL Draft, Powers Johnson is beginning to feel like that Steelers pick. We've had them before. Cameron Hayward, Najee Harris, James Conner, Maurkice Pouncey. Less successfully, Jarvis Jones. These players landing in Pittsburgh surprised nobody. Add Jerry Dulac of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette to the list of those who sound as though they expect it. Or at least, strongly believe it's as likely an outcome as any. He alluded to it several times throughout his latest chat session. I haven't ruled out the first pick being an OL, maybe and perhaps most likely even a center, he wrote at one point asked about the possibility of the Steelers using each of their first 2 picks on linemen. Later asked who he sees the Steelers drafting in the first round, he wrote, center, while also allowing for a skill player. Later on, one reader questioned the value of using a first-round pick on a center over a higher priority position. He responded that there aren't that many stud centers, such as Powers Johnson, adding, if there and #8217 is a really good one in the draft, and there is, get him. Let's be honest. That sounds like the Steelers. You can slap Mike Tomlin or Omar Khan's name on that quote and pass the smell test. After all, Tomlin has drafted 2 running backs and a center in the first round before. Oh, and it's not just about the center position generally. It's about Jackson Powers Johnson. When asked in which direction things are pointing at the position, he said it's pointing toward Oregon. In other words, to Powers Johnson, the Oregon alumnus. Some question if he possesses the athletic profile the Steelers historically value at center. but they also value athleticism at guard, and Isaac Simolo doesn't fit that mold. Cole certainly tricked nobody into believing he was Dermontti Dawson. I tend to agree with the idea that the Steelers drafting Powers Johnson with the 20th overall pick is extremely plausible. If he is on the board when they are on the clock, I don't know how many other players are higher on their board at that time relative to need. That said, he's far from the only first-round option nor the only center option. They can find talented centers in the second and third rounds as well, possibly even the fourth. Powers Johnson may even fall out of the first round for all we know. Draft conversations lay on shifting sands at this time of year. What felt obvious in January or February could sound absurd by late April. Remember really early mock drafts with Thaddeus Moss in the first round? Things take time to crystallize, and there's still time this offseason. And you, fan, what do you think of the situation Jackson Powers Johnson's? Leave your opinion in the comments.